Welcome to the Jungle Brothers podcast. It's Joey here. Today, I'm speaking with Margaret Durnan, who is a good old friend of mine from the west of Australia. She's a movement practitioner, someone that I connected with when I was very much in the movement realm myself. Margaret's a chiropractor. She is an extremely motivated individual. She is highly academic, and we go into that in today's chat to a truly impressive degree. She's running her gym that she built in Perth, Modus Movement. She's helping women become better in their training and healthier and stronger. And then she's also seemingly studying multiple degrees continuously. A real high achiever, a very fiery individual, a great chat. And we talked about today really our time in the movement realm and how that affected her training and her outlook on things. The second part of the show, we dive into more of the strength training for women, which is something that she's been very passionate about in recent years. And I guess the main takeaway there is that the approach to really building strong females is somewhat different to building strength in males. There are more things to consider, and so Margaret takes us through that. It's a really cool chat. I think for anyone who is strength training, who's trying to live a healthier life, who's maybe trying to get motivated, you will enjoy this one. So please enjoy this awesome, wide-ranging chat with my good friend, Marg. All right, Marg, we're live. How you doing, mate?
Good, thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me.
Man, absolute pleasure. I wanted to just start by giving folks a little background on how we know each other. For those of you who are listening, Margaret and I just had like a 10, 15-minute catch-up where I was telling her, stop talking because I want to save that gold for the show because like you're an energetic human. And ever since I've met you, you've just brought like positive energy wherever you go. I believe it was at the Movement X seminar in Melbourne, or you came to the end of it to catch up with Ido Portal and the rest of the movement crew. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it was the upper body strength certification in Melbourne. Yeah.
That's the one. That was, yeah. And so for the uninitiated, it was Ido Portal, who's like, the man, the guy who kind of gave birth to this or gave rise to this movement culture thing. It was my first time doing any work with him. So it was a very kind of pivotal time in my sort of training journey. And I'm guessing for you, Margaret, it was pretty early on in you'd been training with him for a while, but it was still pretty early on for you.
Yeah. I think I'd done one workshop earlier that year, which was the Movement X one, and then had just started the online coaching and was like all about it. Just was like, oh my God, this is so good. Was frothing on it. So obviously I'm in Perth, flew over to Melbourne pre-COVID restriction days where you could just fly around the country whenever you wanted. And there was like the upper body strength and then the corset workshop in Sydney, which I think you went to as well. Or maybe we just caught up. But we just, it was like for both of us, it was kind of like early days. And I think for most people in Australia, it was just taking off. So it was like exciting times, like, training with like-minded people and that sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, it was a very special time, wasn't it? Because there was a lot of buzz around it. It was a very niche thing. There was probably like kind of through you, I was introduced to this like movement crew in Australia where there's probably only about like 12 people. And it was like, and who were all like really into it. But 12 people from the entire country. And we'd get together whenever there was an event in town, or you'd come to Sydney, you would always be really good at bringing everyone. You'd be, guys, I'm coming into town, like getting people to come up from Melbourne and, just hang out. We'd often catch up, whatever, at a cafe, or we'd hang at my gym at the first Jungle gym and do some training. But it was cool. There was like, I don't know. I look back fondly on those years.
Those are some fun times, and we became quite a tight-knit group, and we'd train, eat food. I think like Rod Cooper came and hung out a bunch of times with us, so he's like, it's interesting, he's doing different things now. There's like a bunch of people that have gone and done similar but different things, and it was just like it felt like a real team, like a family environment, and just so much fun. And summertime as well, like we'd be hitting Bondi Beach and getting acai bowls as well.
I guess the funny thing about it now is that obviously like I've got my gym here and the movement piece is a big part of it. It's not, it's not everything we do, but it does form a large emphasis of the training. You're the owner of Modus in Perth. Can you tell us about what you guys are doing there?
So I co-own Modus with Mark Benaki. So Mark moved over from the States. So after we were all kind of hanging out and doing the acai bowls, hanging at Jungle Brothers, Mark moved to Australia, and we started Modus with Anthony Tran back in 2017. But I think we'd started planning. We knew that we wanted to like share all this stuff and this cool thing with the rest of the people around us, but we didn't have a gym or a facility that could accommodate for that. And like the average CrossFit gym was good, but there was also some like, there was some limitations and things that you couldn't really do in the average box. So yeah, we put a lot of groundwork in and, did some different things. Like we've got a big open floor space, took this real modular approach where we run these 6-week projects, and it can literally be anything we want. So we're not limited by the environment that we're in. The environment works around us and what we want to do with our community and what we feel their weak links are, and also like experiment and try new things. So it has this ability to take on a look of, like you're walking into your home. So the wood look laminate, not laminate, what it's called, vinyl plank flooring is kind of like, that could be someone's living room, and trying to bring that idea of movement's not for just the gym. We're trying to incorporate it into everyday life, but here is a place where you as an individual can move and train in the way that you want to. If, you can lift the barbell if you want. There's the rings, there's boxes, there's elements of parkour with the rail balancing, and everything's just kind of movable. So we've got people that live in apartments, and then it's cool because they can come to a 250 square meter place and just hang and like eat food and train without shoes. And yeah, that was like super frustrating when I used to train at other gyms. I'm like, what do you mean I have to put shoes on? I don't want to wear shoes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I think I take that stuff for granted now, that you can train here. And then even if I go if I'm visiting another gym, it's usually someone I know's gym in Sydney, and it's usually a barefoot place if you want it to be. That's right. The reality of like commercial gyms is that you still have to have your shoes on most of the time, and that's those sort of funny rules. What's the so I guess what I was sort of alluding to before was that you've taken a little step away from the movement scene. Talking about those glory days, your training has evolved a little bit since then. I guess before I get you to go into that, could you sort of take us through what your training journey has been?
Yeah. So yeah, I grew up as a kid. So I'm half Filipino, my dad's English, and I grew up in a country town. So I was born in a pretty remote mining community in the northwest of Western Australia. So like there's no trees, up there it's like really hot. There's a lot of like the beach. It's really sunny and warm every day. But not a lot of opportunities for young kids. And, you've got like sport in the sense of you can play netball. And if you're a bloke, you play football. Girls can play football back then. I would have loved to have played football. And so as a kid, I was really active. I was always outdoors, and but never really got the opportunity to play or do different things. Like in the town that I grew up in, there was no gymnastics. There was there's just nothing. So then I got to uni when I was like 17, and I started getting into the gym. And as a chiropractor, I was studying chiropractic science at the time. That's a pretty physical job. I don't know, like for the listeners, if they've ever been to a chiropractor who does manual work, like they're actually putting their hands on you, they're working the muscles, they're maybe dry needling, doing some manipulation. It is physical. And I got to this point when I was like, in my 4th year, I was like, I am weak as piss, and I'm going to eat shit when I graduate, and this is going to be really hard for me. At the time, I was like, I don't know, maybe 57 kilos. And like, doing the whole classic girl thing, like, I just had a salad. Also because I was really poor, like I legit couldn't afford food. But also I was, just like riding my bike because I couldn't put petrol in the car. So I was always like really active, going to the gym, lifting weights. I started, doing like my little tricep pull downs and bicep curls, and then doing, I really loved those Les Mills body attack classes. Like I frothed on those. I fucking love them. So much fun.
Our student.
Yeah, and then yeah, I graduated, and I developed that love. Like you just feel good when you move and when you train, and when you feel healthy, you just everything feels good, and it's very relaxing. You know, it's very mindful, and for someone that is high energy like myself, you have to do something with that energy. You have to use it for productive means. It'd be like you take a border collie, and you can't just make it stay in a small backyard all day. And that's what a lot of people don't realize. If they're doing office work, the body was designed to move, and you know we're originated from like really physically laborious outdoor manual tasks. To even get water, it used to be such a hard endeavor for people, and that's just not the case now. Um, so as I kind of moved through, started working as a chiropractor, I started doing triathlon because I also didn't really do swimming lessons as a kid. Just again, as I mentioned, there wasn't the real opportunity as much to get into that. So I felt like I wanted to get better at the things that I hadn't either had the opportunity to do as a young kid, or that I felt that I really sucked at. And I had a really great mentor who's a chiropractor from America. And he taught us, he's like, if you feel like your weak link is diagnosing and working with the shoulder, then I would go and I would work on the shoulder, and I would go to the weak place. So I had that in my mind from another mentor, to go to the place where you suck at and that you're not confident in until you become more competent and then confident in that. So I started triathlon, and that was like pretty fun, but also like I sucked. You know, like I wasn't winning them because if you're in the pack, you know, if ever you've done one, you're like swimming and you're like punching people in the, you know, in the groin, trying to swim over the top. It was really quite, you know, not fun. And then doing running and yeah, you know, loving my Les Mills stuff. And then eventually I came across Ido because I did a yoga teacher training, and I started noticing like my back was hurting. Like I was like getting back pain, and I was still only young. And that was from work. That was from being a chiro and just slamming on backs. And I'm not a tall person. In my mind, I'm 6 foot, but I'm not like a giant. And that's the problem. I'd be like, you know, taking on these 6'3" dudes and being like, yeah, I got this. Not actually accepting the fact that I'm not built like a 6 foot, you know, Dwayne Johnson figure.
Big country boy.
Yeah. I was just, yeah, exactly. Working with country boys, diesel mechanics that are swinging a sledgehammer for 12 hours a day. Those are my patients. And I was just, you know, slamming myself into it. So that's how I came across Ido, and I was like, it just felt so good. It felt really like what my body needed. And it was also hard work. So that hard work ethic, which I would say that, you know, fundamentally what probably brings a lot of us together is like we enjoy the discipline of training, we enjoy the routine, we enjoy the feeling of working your body, and also like that calming sensation. You're in the present moment when you're working out and when you're training. And when it's challenging, the feeling of like overcoming a challenge, of setting goals, and all of that really, it kind of evolved for me and just brought out a lot of weaknesses. And then, and I kind of, you know, started doing chin-ups. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And started doing handstands and all this other stuff. And then since then, as I mentioned earlier, I started getting into jiu-jitsu, and like recently I've done some karate lessons.
Oh, wow.
With this like old karate. Actually, my partner's dad, he's like 74 and just a beast, you know, like he's 74 and this guy's like got guns on him, you know, like a Navy destroyer. Like it's, and so when I look at the people that have aged well, it's they've taken care of their body, but also not smashed themselves, like this kind of balance. And I think that's what martial arts gives you, right? It gives you this like spiritual, mental, physical, you know, whole person kind of development. So I actually forgot what the original question was.
That's okay. To that point about martial arts, I don't necessarily agree. I think it can, like anything. But I think that most jiu-jitsu practitioners are broken by the time they're, you know, by the time they're approaching their mid-40s, they're a wreck. And that's just the nature of the game. And I think that there are exceptional individuals who manage to do it in a sustainable way when they can do it for life, but they really are the exception. I think too about like those more traditional martial arts like karate and stuff like that. And it's actually interesting. I saw a guy training at the outdoor gym during lockdown, and it was this guy in the corner of my eye. He was a big guy. He looked like an old sort of karate dude in that he had quite a thick build, but he had a big tummy on him. And like a lot of martial artists seem to go that way. They just, whatever, they still got skills. They'll still fuck you up, but they got a big belly, they're not, and because that's not the concern. The concern is the art, right? It's not about looking a particular way usually. But he was doing some handstand stuff. He's doing his wrist prep and he's hanging, then he's doing some like chest to wall handstands, and it was really nice. And I was like, man, you got really nice handstands there. Like you're doing some awesome stuff. And he said, oh, thanks, man. I asked him if he'd been doing it for long. And he replied, no, man, I'm a karate guy, but karate gym's closed. So I took up handstands a few months ago and I've just been playing around with this stuff. And I was like, oh, wow. Like there was a real level of like, I don't know, quality to what he was doing. And I felt maybe that was exemplary of similar to what you're talking about with your partner's old man. Like it's this kind of standard that some of those practitioners sort of strive for in their training.
Yeah. And I think it's been diluted over the years. Like I know Rob's dad, he's like, watches the karate in the Olympics. He's like, that's rubbish, and he wrote this like, I would say you're right though, in that most people end up broken in conventional, well, I'd say like conventional sports, like football anyway, like even, even the movement stuff, like when you're not mindful about it, like there's the potential to really just fuck yourself up. And Rob's dad, his name's Bruce, such a legend. He wrote this almost like a thesis on the history of karate and his particular lineage. And there's like this academic or this like scholarship to what he's doing and planning and programming and then, attention and mindfulness to all areas of the body, which I think more and more, and as I get older, that mindful approach and being really present in the moment to the task that we're applying ourselves to becomes very important. It's really challenging for me. You know what I'm like? I'm just like, I'm going to do this and this and this and run like, 4 concurrent activities. And maybe like sometimes the rice is burning while I'm, writing emails or researching something. But sometimes, I get it together. But I've taken a lot from, using training approaches to be mindful. It's okay, I'm just doing this and I'm going to monotask it and try to monotask it. And I think those particularly the old karate dudes, before it's been commercialized, I think out of a necessity of running a business, there is an element where you have to commercialize things. And it's also just evolution of culture, right? That's just kind of what happens to any discipline. Doesn't matter what it is, there's an evolution process.
Yeah. Tell me, so going back to that that sort of journey of yours, it just could give us a rough idea. How long were you doing the movement thing for?
So I did my first workshop in January 2014, and I would say probably realistically the last year I wouldn't have done a lot of like the movement in terms of the online coaching, like mentorship. I wouldn't have done for a good year. That being said, there are some elements that are fundamental that I do no matter what. Obviously, like hanging, spine work, wrist prep, like squat routine. There's actually a lot of stuff that I still do, like floor work, but it's just not like, I'm not in a place in my life where I want to dedicate 2 hours to doing arm weights. I have done that, like I've done that. But at the moment, like time is currency. And I think you can relate to that when you have a family. You've got, a young baby now. You have to be pretty judicious with how you allocate your time. And, starting medicine really was a humbling experience because I was quite naive in the amount of time that I would have to train. Like I was still doing 2 sessions a day up until I started med school, and was really quite
training sessions.
Yeah.
Of what kind of duration?
So it depended. So in the lead up to going and joining the Army Reserves, I brought in a lot more like running, like cardiovascular conditioning, like in the form of, there's a really great program called Maximal Aerobic Speed. And there's different ways you can do that, but fundamentally it was to try and build up my running capacity. And it was like a real slap in the face when I went to go and do a 1600 meter, 1 mile time trial after just doing mostly movement work and then, you know, some jets for the preceding 4 or 5 years. And I was like, fuck, I'm gassed. Like, this shit was hard.
So wait, let me just confirm. This is your second. So you're already a chiropractor at that point. So that's
yes.
And so now this is you studying medicine right now.
Yes. Yeah.
Damn, you're an achiever. So just to clarify the timeline. So you'd done your chiropractic piece and you were working, like you were practicing as a chiropractor. Mm-hmm. Got into the movement realm. We're talking like like 2014, 2015. Stumbled across jiu-jitsu like a lot of people do. I'm guessing you thought, oh, this is so much fun. What a great type of practice. And then you kind of got bitten by the bug and then started to cop some injuries and started to get a stiff back and you're like, oh wait, this thing's really fucked for my body. But God damn, it's fun, right? That's the whole like paradox with jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
So where you are now, obviously you've kept some of the movement stuff. Are you still training jiu-jitsu?
No, I haven't done jiu-jitsu for probably about 9 months. And I want to go back. It's just like the hour, you know, even like every hour is precious. So over summer, I'm hoping to go back, but also with a different approach. I don't think I'll do competition. I probably did a competition too early. And I kind of got these, you know, my division was like great, and then I went into like the open, and then there was a girl who was just on the cusp of going from white to blue, and she just like took my arm and she fucking snapped that shit, and it was like and then next day I'm back in jiu-jitsu class. I can barely bend it beyond 90. I'm like, I'm fine, this is totally fine. And it still crunches a little bit, so I'm really mindful now about that injuries. And I think as a chiropractor, because as a chiropractor you work self-employed, and your hands and your wrists and your elbows and your shoulders are really important. And I was always very cautious to not get injured, because I'm like, if I get an injury, I can't work. No work, no money. Being like, once I finished my medical degree, and that was another reason to kind of go back and do some more. Say, one, I'd evolved past like just doing the basic chiro thing. I'd done a couple of other postgrad degrees in between that time as well. And med satisfies my brain. It's like I needed a sufficient intellectual challenge, and also something that would make me do one thing to the exclusion of all others. It's kind of like dating. You know, if you like, say you date a chick and she's like really fun, but she's kind of dumb and doesn't really like fulfill your needs, you're like, cool, that's fine, but I'm going to go hang out. Maybe I want to go hang out with other people because like you're not my everything. But if you find like one hell of a woman that challenges you, that fulfills all your needs, that it's really rare to find. But once you find that person, you're like, hot damn, this occupies all of my attention. I don't have any other time. I actually don't really want to do anything else now, because I found the thing that I want to put my energy into. So I think that was medicine for me, and it forced me to get really ruthless and create a hierarchy of priorities. So it's like, you know, it's really fun. It's so much fun. I'm going to go back, but I think I'm taking that lifetime approach of like, okay, well, even if I do over summer, I do a couple of classes a week when I've got more time and I'm on uni break, that's better than nothing. Or maybe I just do like one class a fortnight. That's like manageable. But I wouldn't say I have that timetable, that ideal balance yet, because there's just so many things that I want to do.
Would you say that you're the kind of person that, like how you just described what medicine is for you, that you search for that in, like you found that in movement as well? Because I know you were, you know, balls deep in that, and that's
so balls deep.
You could say that that's almost as demanding in a way. It's like, whatever, you got to train all the fucking time. You got to show up every day. You got to come to the events. It's almost like what you're saying about medicine. It kind of forces you to just hold that line and stick to the process, as they like to say.
Yeah. And I do think, you're right. Like I, by nature, am just Like, I think I remember saying this to you, like I'd wake up and I just want to attack the day.
I
And I
remember
get,
you saying that explicitly, and I still think about it, and I'm like, fuck, I wish I could wake up every day and just feel like attacking the day.
yeah.
I'm generally
And,
a very optimistic guy, but sometimes I wake up, I'm like, oh, I'm a bit sore, a bit tired.
yeah, and that probably happens to me. I do get more of those days now, just because like this year's been like, whew, fuck, that's a big year, you know, a really big year even for me. And movement, yeah, for me that was like, I was like, whoa, I just found the best thing ever. The more I did it, and I think the more that evolved, I do think that in terms of if we like use this overarching, all-encompassing umbrella and we call it movement, and I can still do, you know, jiu-jitsu is still movement, like running is still movement, like all these things, it's still moving. I think that's how I see things now, rather than having it defined for me by someone that doesn't exist in my circle, in my reality, in my world. And what I mean with all the respect and love in the world is that I can't, and I'm not going to train like Guido Portal and Odelia Goldschmidt, because they don't live in my world and they don't live in my life, and my body has different needs. I'm a woman and I have like all of these things. I have a family, like you know, my nephew's 10 now, and I was essentially co-parenting with my sister. Had him very young when she was 17, and he didn't have a dad on the scene. And the reality is we have responsibilities. And I really like, you know, Jordan Peterson's approach to this in the sense of like, you take care of your own house first. And, you know, I think we can use training as a distraction for a lot of things. And now that there's like a really heavy influence in the movement culture for stillness and meditation, really what that is like self-reflection and looking in the mirror. And actually also at Notre Dame, the School of Medicine's, they're just amazing. They force us to do self-reflection as assignments, and they force us every week. They have professional development and a self-reflection framework for us to actually evaluate our emotions. Like there's some really great intellectual discussions, you know, questions like, okay, what is life? When do you consider life to begin? You know, looking at human error, and also under this or underpinned by a non-punitive environment of non-judgment, which is really important.
What's non-punitive mean?
Like, so if you fuck up, you're not afraid of someone coming down on you like a ton of bricks, and you're really encouraged to actually step out of your comfort zone and become a teacher to your peers and use peer-to-peer learning when you're not an expert on things, when you really just have no idea. But that's actually how you learn. And that's in the early days when we're all like hanging out and stuff, and we were all just teaching each other, like, oh yeah, I've been trying this. And you'd ask the next person like, oh, I'm really struggling with this kick up, or like blah blah, and everyone was just kind of like helping each other out. And you know, and then I think there's like there's a sort of tendency for, and you'll notice this with as a father, as a little man, as Leo grows up, you kind of want to be like, you know, there's a time to reprimand, but it's always got to be under that, like, you know, I've got you and I have unconditional love for you no matter what. Like, I'm your father, I'm your teacher, I'm here to teach you literally how to do life. And I felt like, you know, contrasting med school, specifically Notre Dame, because not all universities do this, they recognize, okay, we're getting like doctors that are stressed, that are burnt out, that are taking their lives. There's a huge mental health burden in all professions, but particularly doctors, and especially now with the COVID situation, like doctors are on the front line, GPs are copying it from people about all kinds of stuff. There's a real need to self-reflect. So, and also to stay healthy. So there's like this framework that they go, okay, you need to like have the environment, you need to get out in nature, and you need to get sunlight, and you need to have good social networks, and you need to feel connected, and you need to get your nutrition down pat, and you need to exercise, and you need to have meaningful, purposeful engagement. That's getting there in terms of a system that for me is like, you know, the all-encompassing woman or man, like the animus or the anima. Like, that's the thing that I needed, was like a complete system to be like, Margaret, you need to work on your shit. You need to work on your shit, and don't use training to distract yourself. And
Or study.
yeah,
Yeah. Like
yeah, that's it.
Yeah, you got to. Yeah, that's cool. It makes a lot of sense to have that stuff built into the process, because I mean, yeah, I think everyone's kind of aware, like so many careers, but of all of them, medicine seems to be particularly geared towards like super long hours, crazy like expectations of amounts of work and study you got to do, and then whatever it becomes in and of itself like an unhealthy pursuit, doesn't it?
Totally.
Kind of like owning a gym. If you don't curb your fucking behaviors early, like you're trying to sell people healthy stuff, but you're like under rested and over caffeinated.
So true.
All those things.
Yeah.
Give me like a real, for folks who maybe aren't so familiar with the whole movement thing, tell me like so people who are training with Ido Portal, what is this movement thing? Because we all understand, like you said, you know, movement is running and it's jiu-jitsu and it's lifting weights, it's all those things. But when we say like movement or the movement culture, it's referring to a group of, you know, a system of training that really looks like what?
So I think that's like the inherent difficulty, isn't it? Because the movement culture is a system of training that's dictated by the guy that owns the trademark, which is Ido Portal. Okay. And it takes on the face and takes on the themes of what this almost like social media hierarchy dictate. So it's like a collective group. And, you know, if we look at the word culture, this process of enculturation, it's a taking on of habits, behaviors, appearances of the collective. So that started out for us as like gymnastics rings, handstands, mobility work, a lot of body weight training, and then has now evolved into more things like utilizing the tennis balls, people that would have seen this on Instagram, like, juggling or dribbling tennis balls with the feet or the hands, engaging in hand-eye coordination tasks and more complex neurological tasks, a lot of inner practice. And so it's really evolved, and it's really hard to quantify, because what it is really, as what Ido would hope people conceive, is a very difficult intellectual concept, because it's always changing. I can only answer for what it means for me and the people that I coach and train, that I'm trying to communicate for them, because I do feel like I'm probably disconnected from what Ido would like to be, how he would like his movement culture to be defined. But in terms of movement training, it's essentially looking at how we move our body and developing a physical intelligence and a physical capacity in a number of different realms. It's not just using strength as a metric. So if we look at all of the different things the human body is capable of, we have things like strength, coordination, object manipulation, working with another partner, so involving martial tasks, involving elements of mobility, of mindfully engaging in activation, deactivation, really also a use of breath work, not breast work, but breath work. But also breast, depending on the game we're playing.
Okay.
And like stillness and meditating and using, like, going into the outer world and also going into the inner world. So it's really hard to quantify, but those are the kinds of things that we tell people.
I'm excited for the person that's never heard of movement and they just heard that description. They're like, oh, okay, yeah, got it.
Yeah. It's like super vague.
Totally. But yeah, look, for me, it was, what attracted me was the body weight strength, the mobility, the cool tricks, the handstands and the sick stuff on the rings. And I got to a point with it, just to, I guess, give folks a bit of context, where I'd gotten what I wanted from that realm, and it was starting to go into other realms that, were somewhat fascinating to me. Like, say, when we're at movement camp, which would be like these 10-day events we'd go to in Thailand, where it's like you're just training all fucking day and you're going super deep on these very obscure aspects of your physicality. I found a lot of that stuff fascinating, but when I came back from camp, it's like, I'm never going to fuck with that again. Like, I'm just interested in getting strong and like doing sick tricks and looking good. And, and I think that is still what largely attracts a lot of people to it. Because when you see people doing movement, it's like they're doing handstands, they're on the rings, they look strong, all that stuff. But I think, the inner workings of it, or the people at the top of the pyramid are now taking it into that direction that, whatever, it's its own thing, and it is very obscure.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that's the challenge, because if we look at a utilitarian perspective, so what's going to apply for the good of most people, not for the good of all, the majority of the average Australian population, like the majority of people I work with, certainly as a chiropractor, they don't need to be doing really complex neural tasks. They can't even get up out of a chair without pain, some of them. Like some people, they can't squat and they don't have full range of motion, or they've had surgery, or they're a mum of 3 kids. They don't have the fucking time to be going into a really esoteric existential debate on what movement is. And, they need to work on basic things, basic, simple things. And then for people like the elite athletes, say you are playing, you are a tennis star, or you are the next Ronaldo. Yeah, cool. Like, do the soccer ball stuff, but nothing that I really give to an elite athlete on that level in their realm is going to help them. I have to give them like a different form of diversification. So, and that's when I started the Masters in Strength and Conditioning last year. That
started that as well.
Yeah, so I started doing my Masters in Exercise Science in Strength and Conditioning through ECU last year. And
Jeez,
you know what though? It's funny you say that, but then I get to uni. So in my cohort at Notre Dame, I feel sometimes like I am like the dumbest person in the room, and I've done nothing with my life. There's people in there with PhDs in immunology that are all now doing the med degree. There are people that have got like PhDs in neuroscience, and that's why I know I'm in the right place, because I'm like, I feel like a small fish in a big pond. I'm in the right pond, because these people are going to elevate me and lift me up. If you're the big fish in the small pond, yeah, your ego is going to get a stroke and you feel like fucking awesome because you're like King Dick and no one's going to ever question you because you say big words, but you're not going to grow from that. So I found it really great to be in med school. But yeah, so back to the Masters, going then and looking at it from a intellectual. Oh, did I just drop out? Or did I? No.
Yeah, it turned to a little photo of you, which I was like, it doesn't actually look that much like you.
No, it's like an old version. So when I started my Masters, I was like really wanting this, my brain felt like it needed some work, because I've been doing like this training and stuff, but my natural tendency is towards academics. Like I wasn't, I wasn't, I would say like even in movement culture, like I'm never going to be the strongest, and like it was never in my wheelhouse on my goals list to be popping one-arm handstands. Like I wanted to get like a 10-second handstand, and then anything after that was a bonus, because I looked at the training, and I still look at training as a means to an end. It's not the end for me. Like Jordan Peterson in his new book talks about to essentially become all you can conceivably be in this lifetime. And if it's something that you can conceive to be achievable in this lifetime, it's probably not a big enough vision to have, in my perspective. Now that might look different to different people. I think there is a lot of honor and beauty and necessity in people going, I'm going to be the best parent ever, or my job is to be, like even a cleaner. So my mother was a cleaner, so that's not being disrespectful, but I'm going to make sure when I clean, it's going to be at a high standard. And I really needed this intellectual side to the training so I could understand what the fuck I was doing, because there was questions were coming up and I wasn't getting I'm not sure about this. So I want to go look it up. So, and I like structure. So I love tertiary education because you have structure, you have deadlines, you have learning objectives, you have you know exactly what's expected of you and what's going to be taught of you. And I did feel like, kind of going through a bit of the mentorship stuff, I was like, things are just changing. Like what do you, like, okay, it's changed now, but it was like this. It was like the goalpost kept shifting. And for my need for like routine and order, I prefer to have something that's more structured, and also that goes really deep into the academics, acknowledging that you can go down these rabbit holes and never come out. So back to the need to diversify and the need to have other things. For me, med school served that. The training component also serves that, and I think for average people, we still need the cool tricks, like they still have their place, because the journey of achieving like acrobatics, or the journey of achieving like really decent, numbers with lifting, the journey to achieving your ring routine, that is necessary. And I really feel it's so important for young men. I don't feel for young men that are charged with testosterone, they just want to fight, fuck, and I don't know, fart or whatever. Like we don't have wars anymore. So young men who maybe have like a bit more of a desire to begin to physical pursuits, generally, I would actually say to them, go join the military. Go join the military. It's like still train, but join the military, because you get a brotherhood there, and it satisfies this primitive warrior gene that some people have that is not being realized. Like you can't take a warrior and put them into an office. It just won't work.
Yeah, well, I agree with you on quite a bit of that, and I think the like martial arts, jiu-jitsu training, even training, like coming, like say at our gym, we've got young guys who just channel their energy into whatever they do here, and if it's not channeled, that becomes a problem potentially. Tell me about so with the movement thing and training generally, and you touched on this. You touched on, as a female, earlier on in your training career, you were eating quite light, salads, that kind of thing, trying to stay small, like following that very typical kind of fitness approach. So less typical these days, but largely kind of what women have been conditioned to think they have to do. It's obviously evolved for you, and you now, the way you talk, it's clear that you have a better understanding of what your body needs and that kind of thing. Can you talk about when I knew you? I remember I came around. You said, "Oh, come pick me up. There's a crew of us staying at this place, and we'll go train. I'll make breakfast." And you roasted like a lamb shoulder for breakfast. And I got around there, and it was like Marg pulled this awesome slow roasted lamb shoulder out of the oven at like 8 a.m. And we just stood around and like ate this lamb. And then I think later in the day you produced we were looking for a snack in between training sessions, and you produced like a jar of pate, and you're like, "Oh, here, I've got some pate." And then and it was pretty much black coffee, and then that was about it. Tell me about how your view of nutrition and sort of female needs have changed in recent times.
Yeah, that's like that. I don't actually remember that, but that's totally something that I would do. And yeah, I think you're right. It's definitely evolved. When I first started training with Ido, I was very paleo geared, so I'd already been doing that for a while. My friend Jeremy Princey, who's the holistic lifestyler, he and I did a holistic lifestyle coaching course just after we finished Cairo through Paul Check, and that was great, because after uni we were just sinking back, like cheap refined carbohydrates. Like we were still like pretty healthy. Like in uni I would make these large vegetable lasagnas, and I've always loved cooking, so that's never been an issue. But it's about knowing like what you need, not just for a woman. I think this actually universally applies to men and women, but women are in a slightly different category because of our menstrual cycle. We need a lot more food than what we realize. We need a lot more protein than what we realize. We need, like, that peri-workout nutrition is really important, especially for women, because we're such cyclical beings. When I started training with Ido, I remember I was, maybe on my third phase of online coaching, and I'd finished a bedtime session. And as you remember, like, you were doing 3 sessions a day on like a Monday and a Thursday. It was like bend time in the morning and handstands, and then bend time in the evening. And it was 6 days a week of training, and you had 1 day off. And so you make a lot of progress, but you have a tendency, or a lot of people have a tendency to cook themselves. I would say even if they're eating lots of food, you cook yourself with a large amount of volume and no off season or not appropriate recovery. So I was eating paleo, but I was eating fuck all carbs.
It's kind of characteristic of the paleo scene.
Yeah. And it was almost like, carbs for sure were a bit demonized, I'd say. And Edo was also paleo and very low carb. And then I was like, I'd finish a band session and I'd be like, I need a nap. And that's not usual for me. But I'd have like a nap and it was fine. But then I actually noticed I'd started getting a bit more like puffy, and I was like, what's going on? And it wasn't that I was necessarily putting on slabs of muscle. When I first started, I put on like a bunch of muscle and a bunch of weight, like a good 5 kilos. But I was like, this is like not good, because I was like also staying up late to finish my session. Sometimes I'd be in the gym till 10:30 at night and I wasn't getting enough sleep. I get like 5 or 6 hours sleep. And I started coaching with Courtney Townley, who had done online coaching with Ido. She was also one of the early women. We actually had a women's Facebook group, and there was like 10 of us in there from around the world.
Oh, wow.
So Courtney Townley has her coaching business, Grace and Grit. And I started coaching with her. And when I tracked it, when I jumped on MyFitnessPal and I tracked it, I was eating like 1,000 calories a day, sometimes 800.
Holy shit.
I was working as a chiropractor. I was training 6 hours a day. I was like, hustling. I was just like doing all this stuff. And I was like, whoa. I'd had one coach before that who was more of the Poliquin-esque, and they got me eating more protein, which was good, but it was still like not enough carbs, like really not enough. So then when it's tracked and you look at the numbers, like, oh my God, no wonder, like, I'm like, not that I felt like, I didn't feel tired. I just felt jacked up all the time, which is another thing. You can actually, like, when you've been eating not enough food, then your sympathetic nervous system kicks in and you don't realize, you're like, I feel amazing. But actually, it's the old cortisol. Yeah. Hello, cortisol. And cortisol will rise, mediated by your sympathetic nervous system, so your fight and flight system, as opposed to your rest and digest parasympathetic nervous system. Cortisol will rise to maintain your blood sugar levels within a window. They don't and can't drop too low, because then you'll get hypoglycemic. So cortisol mobilizes like glycogen, or your body can use things like proteins that can take your muscle tissue. But then what will happen is you'll also start to like retain fluid. So this is something particularly with women. I term this moon face appearance. Like it's not really like a Cushing's moon face. So Cushing's is a disease, it's a pathology where you actually have hyper or way too much cortisol secretion. But I think there can be times where you're really stressed and you're like stressing the body out nutritionally, stressing it out through exercise, stressing it out emotionally, psychologically, also not getting enough sleep. There are different layers to this allostatic stress concept that can result in abnormal hypothalamic, so your brain, hypothalamus, pituitary, also in your brain, adrenal, so the adrenal gland sits on top of your kidney axis, where we have a little bit of overstimulation of our sympathetic nervous system. And I think women are highly sensitive to this. Men are sensitive to this. They just don't have this monthly card or report card, like the period or the menstrual cycle, to give them feedback on where they're sitting. Also, women have other hormones at play, and women are so much more sensitive about weight gain and loss. I mean, I say that, but actually I also know a fair few blokes that are like, they get really hung up on aesthetics as well, but women even more so, because of what, traditional fitness culture has given us. So I did this precision nutrition certification, and that was great. And I also went through as a client for a year. So I did this certification, plus I went through as a client, and it was great. And it talks about this concept of being a nutritional agnostic. So everyone's individual nutrition requirements are determined by them. And now with the research, so jumping back into the med school scene, I just had some lectures on this. Every person has a different nutritional profile and requirement. Every person. You can't say to people, do the paleo diet, because some people do really well and some people do really poorly. Just like you can't say to everyone that a vegan diet's going to work. And I know of a lot of women that have been in the CrossFit scene that have come off the paleo diet with being super low carbs and being unable to lose body fat. And as soon as you add in carbs and get over the fear of eating carbs, and when I say carbs, I'm talking about rice, like good amounts of rice. Yeah, sourdough bread. Is it that I'm advocating to be smashing back bad quality food? No, but now I'll have like a cinnamon scroll, or I'll have a jam donut, and I'm not feeling guilty for like having a cinnamon scroll and a jam donut.
Remember when I had the donuts in Thailand?
Yes.
Middle of movement camp, and I snuck away to the secret cafeteria.
Yeah.
And Margaret's like, "What are you doing here?" And I'm like, "I'm going to buy a donut." And everyone was like, "No way!" And I'm like, "What? I'm going to get it." And it had a little sign. It's in Thailand, and it said,
"Donuts."
Nice. This is incredible, though, right? Yeah, like even the fact that you have to specify that when I say carbs, I'm not advocating that you eat bad foods. That indicates that there is still this link that we have where it's like carbs are bad. And no, they're not. It's just another macronutrient and you need it. How much and, what source you get it from. Okay. That's another discussion, but it's really fascinating what you say. Like just today, I was looking at old photographs of our gym from our original Jungle Brothers, because I was making a design for another podcast episode. And I was stumbling across these old photos on our Facebook, and I'm looking and I'm like, oh, wow. And I saw there's a photo of me standing with a bunch of people, and I was like, fuck, man, I'm so stripped. Like I was like probably the most muscular I've been, and also the lowest body fat. And I didn't realize, like, I didn't perceive myself as that at the time, but I look back, I'm like, wow, man, I was super lean. And in my head, I'm like, you look good. But I was also completely under eating and overtraining, not sleeping enough that whole time. Like what you said was exactly what I was doing as well. And I think my calories would have been under 1,500 or under 2,000 for the most.
Wow.
But it's incredible, right? Because you can look really good like that, but you can be totally struggling and falling apart internally and fucking up other aspects of your life.
So true. So a good example of that, like my partner, Rob, he just left the SAS after like 22 years. And when I met him and we were training together, he was like, I don't know, 5, for sure, no more than 6% body fat, and training twice a day, like real heavy into the CrossFit scene, but like had all these like joint, injuries and joint pain and stuff like this. And, was eating like a 12-year-old Chinese gymnast. And that, like, one of the things that we did, and I sort of said to him, like, look, you've got a couple of choices. And I do this with the women that I coach. So I do health coaching for women now because I had such a positive experience from just like eating food, like, whoa, so simple, eating enough food. So I coach women, and I said to him, like, look, just track what you eat and you'll be surprised. You think we've got like a whole section of the population that thinks that they're eating less than what they're eating, and that predisposes them to obesity and, all the other lifestyle diseases like diabetes. But what I've noticed in people that train regularly, it's actually opposite, which is they train so much, but they don't eat enough. But the public health guidelines from most medical professionals or healthcare professionals is to go with portion control sizes. But that applies if you're obese. If you're training, you need to fuel like a motherfucker. Like if you're doing significant amounts of, strength work, you need to be on top of your nutrition. Because if you're not, like, you literally, after you work out, you've got a half an hour window, you need to get your proteins and carbs in, because your receptors and your transporters are active when you're exercising. So that's the time to have carbs. And the average person doesn't know that. How can they know that? It's hard. I had a 5-year degree and I didn't know that. And then, you kind of like go back by what the other person's doing, and everyone's got a fucking opinion about what you should be eating. Oh, I tried this. Yeah, you should do this. Yeah, but like they've got a completely different demographic or background. Like me as a half Filipino, I've got different requirements to someone that's from a Slavic background, and yet remember I was like talking about earlier, there's some themes, some universal themes. I feel that getting adequate nutrition that's calibrated on a regular basis, like a weekly to bi-weekly basis for what your needs are, if you are an active person, is pivotal to having a full functioning healthy life. Because if you don't, first of all, it's the most easily corrected. It's so easy to correct, but it's bound by all of this psychological bullshit, especially for women. They get so afraid if they eat more food that they're going to get fat. And yeah, if you're eating 1,000 calories and you jump straight up to 2,000 calories, you will put on fat for sure. But there's a way to do it. So, reverse dieting, which is kind of big in the bodybuilding scenes at the moment, the figure competition scenes. That's sorry.
What is reverse dieting? I've heard of it.
Yeah, so that's essentially, it came out of Lane Norton, who has a PhD in biochemistry, I believe. But he was a real big person to found this concept in bodybuilding, because, you'd have all these people cut and they'd go on a calorie deficit, and they're like, trying to get super shredded to get up on stage for their 5 seconds of fame. And then they'd go back to eat normal food and they'd blow up. And they'd get like this rebound weight, and like, what's going on? So then what they do is they cut again and they starve themselves. And every time they did that, they were getting like bigger and bigger. So what a reverse diet does is, if you've been in a period of caloric deficit, then you get that baseline figure, you work out. So Precision Nutrition have an online calculator, which is pretty accurate, because you plug in your activity levels and your meal preferences. So even if you're vegetarian, you can plug it in online and you see what the difference is. And then every week you increase by like 50 to 100 calories until you reach where you're supposed to be at for basic life. Because when most people, like for you being ripped and shredded on 1,500 calories, that's like not even enough food for basic function. And so you don't really realize that until, people end up just burnt out. They're just like burnt out. And so, yeah, that's reverse dieting. So you're taking someone out of a calorie deficit gradually and slowly, and you're matching that with your weight. So you're measuring yourself on the scales regularly, not looking at it from a emotionally charged place, but kind of looking at it as just data, like what's happening, where's my body at, am I matching my calories, having a training load as well, not that you're sitting on the couch and like watching TV all day. Like, this is for my caveat is this is for active people that are training on a regular basis. And then you get to a point where you're at maintenance calories, and then you stay there for a good 6 months before you do anything. So you stay there for a good 6 months, depending on how long you've been at a deficit. That could be like a year, maybe 18 months for women who have been just in this cycle of dieting all the time. Laurie Christy King, so Laurie CK, has a great ebook that tells you exactly how to do this. It's easier and preferable when you have a coach who can guide you through that process, because for women, a lot of emotions come up, like you'd have them at Jungle Brothers, you'd have women that are coming in, and we certainly have them at Modus. They're coming in, they're dedicated, they're doing the classes, they're doing the work, and maybe they're not getting the chin-ups, and maybe they're not seeing the results, and maybe they're like, hey, like I'm putting on weight, or why am I not getting like leaner or whatever. And so as soon as you feed them up and you do that over a gradual process, wow, the results are amazing. And I've got a girl that I'm training at the moment, or coaching. So I do 1 year, 6 month minimum, but like 1 year programs. And she was coming to Modus like religiously and doing the work, but like being tired, and I guess also buying into a narrative of like, I'm not a strong person. I don't have that ability. I'm like, you totally have that fucking ability. You just don't realize it yet. Stick with me, kid. I'm going to make you eat so much goddamn food. You're going to be like begging me that you don't want to eat chocolate ever again. You're going to be so satisfied.
And you will be strong.
And you'll be strong. And lo and behold, 6 months later, she pops her first chin up. And it was like, when Leo does this as a parent, when they take their first steps, you're just like, oh my God, I'm so proud. You know, you're like on the inside, you're like, this is like Calvin Harris and Rihanna playing like, baby, this is what we came for. Because she did a chin up and she was just like, oh my God, I'm amazed. And then she's got 2 chin ups and now she started doing sprint training and her weight is like, it's the same. She's eating double the amount of food that she was eating before. She's getting fucking strong. She's deadlifting.
Wow.
She's got energy. She's got like actual energy to focus in class. And she said to me a few weeks ago, Margaret, I now know what you mean about actually enjoying the class. She's like, I am not tired. I can pay attention. Like half the people that come and see me as a chiropractor, if they sorted out their nutrition, they would be in a much better place for it. And I think, and so what that will be is the platform. Like I envision a society or for sure a medical fraternity, and there is this emerging, this lifestyle medicine group where we are not specialists of diseases and not dealing with sick care, but we're actually working on a preventative model. And that's where, for me, the more gyms and the more jungle alliances we have, fucking good. The more we need more of that shit. We need more people leading from the front and showing others, like, this is an example of what you can do, and here are the places that you can go to. If people that are actually thinking about this stuff and going, hey, yeah, like I'm eating more and I feel better, not the boot camps that are like, you must eat 1,200 calories and you're going to, smash yourself. It's like, no, get the foundations right, but truly right. And again, you have to deal with this whole like psychological narrative that people have around food, right? And from there, the results will follow. So I still eat a lot of protein. At the moment, because of time, and I still meal prep. I still like cook all my own food, as I said, because I love good quality food. I'm more relaxed on things. Like I'll have a bit of like, chocolate, from time to time. And I was really quite militant and quite strict before, which I think all of us have been in that place at some point.
Oh, damn, you carried around a jar of pate with you.
I did, yeah. I would do some crazy things. Like when I'd go to America, I would take I don't know if you've seen those 6-pack fitness nutrition bags, and I'd like be fucking meal prepped for the plane. I'm like, I'm not eating plain food. There's like blueberries and
I do the one that's got different little lunch containers,
yeah,
and protein shakes, and
that was me. Yeah, totes, that was me.
So tell me then, talking about your girl who got the chin ups, and this is something I wanted to ask you because we push, obviously body weight strength training is a huge thing that we focus on in our training system and obviously in yours too. And it's a big part of the movement realm. It is notoriously challenging as a style of training for anyone because body weight strength is just harder to attain, chin ups, pull ups, whatever stuff on the rings, because you're working with your own body, which it's very hard to manipulate that load, right? It's quite fixed. Whereas for folks who are deadlifting or lifting kettlebells, you can just grab a lighter weight. But particularly so for women, the body weight strength thing, the upper body strength is really challenging. And the chin-ups are a great example. That's a real common movement milestone here at our gym. And we really push it on women. We're like, hey, you can totally master chin-ups. Like you should chase it and get your first one because it's an awesome milestone. And, the process is valuable. But what, can you talk on that process for women and maybe also paralleling it with your own sort of piece in changing your nutrition to the point where you might be heavier now than you were when you were doing all that training, which makes bodyweight training harder, but you're also healthier. So how do you reconcile the two?
Yeah, great question. And I think it's a really good thing that you're encouraging women to pursue bodyweight training and upper body strength. So, and there's a few reasons for that. By about 50, the average woman would have gone through menopause, and where you see a significant decline in estrogen, and that's associated with a loss in bone density. And that actually that rate of the loss of bone density is highest in their first year of menopause. So, for example, if they hit menopause and they don't get a period at the age of 50, like that's the time where they're just going to see a rapid decline in the mass that they already have. Now, if they didn't have sufficient bone mass prior to that point, so I'm talking in your 30s and 40s particularly, if they didn't have sufficient mass, then that decline is going to it's not going to be offset by having like really dense, dense bones. The reason why that's a problem is because of the rate and the risk of fractures, of osteoporotic fractures in women 60 plus, and it's one of the leading causes of morbidity and disabilities, and it's a big deal, because once you lose mobility in terms of like being able to get up and do the things that you want, your quality of life declines. And I speak to that now because for women, they need to start doing these things in their 20s and 30s in anticipation of 20 years down the track. So things like grip strength, they're also correlated with these sorts of adverse or these undesirable outcomes as women age. And the chin up, you're literally gripping, so you're maintaining grip strength. It's also one of the 3 exercises that'll give you the best core strength. Like, chin ups are just so good, but they are really challenging because unlike men have really, broad shoulders and smaller pelvis, and their weight is differently distributed. Women have most of their weight in their legs, and unless you're like a really petite girl, then it's really challenging when you start out for the average person. I'm not talking to like people that are already busting out sets of 5. So when you start out, it's really daunting. It feels like an impossible task, but it's one that's really necessary. So in terms of how to approach it, it's like science. And you guys know that you get results. Like, follow this program, do the work consistently, you'll get the results. However, every time we train, that is an inflammatory and stressful event to the body. It's eustress, so we know that if we recover adequately with sleep and nutrition, then that will actually help us to super compensate and build up more. But if we're not giving our bodies the protein that it needs, then we are not going to necessarily see those benefits, because it's like you're trying to build a house with bricks. So it's like, I want to build a house with bricks. Okay, so what do you need? Well, I need bricks. So it's like, I want to do a chin up. But how are we going to build the muscle? Well, you need the protein, because protein and amino acids are the smallest constituent of our muscles. And when we take those into the body, as well as the carbohydrates to fuel, we give our body the energy to direct it to the goals that we want. But yeah, and I am heavier. I'm like, I think in uni I was at 57 kilos, and now I'm like, I fluctuate between 65 to 68 kilos. And it was a difficult process in the beginning, when I remember like started doing lots of chin-ups, I started eating more food, my shoulders got bigger, I had to go to a wedding, I had to put this wedding dress on, or not my wedding dress, but like a dress for the wedding, zip it up. Oh shit, zip got stuck. What the fuck? And it got stuck. Like I broke the dress. It was like this really nice dress. I loved it. But it was like a size 8 dress, and I was no longer rocking a size 8 dress. I was rocking a size 12. And so I was like, and I remember I was like, oh my God. I had this meltdown. And this is why I say a coach is really important, because, and I had Courtney, I had someone to turn to go like, look at all the things you can do now. What would you rather? Would you rather be eating 0 food, like literally having to watch everything that you ate, like, just ordering a salad? Or would you like to order the 300-gram Scotch fillet steak and finish it, and then have like a side, and like, what do you want? Like, where's your quality of life, and what are your goals and priorities? So with my girl that I'm coaching at the moment, that's been a really good an ongoing conversation, because one of the initial goals was to get skinny. And I was like, in my head, I'm kind of like, okay, we'll roll with that. That's why it's a year with me coaching, because we'll see how you go, eating like 2,500 calories versus eating 1,000 calories before. And then I essentially give them a choice, because then it's like, yeah, you can eat 1,000 calories, or you can have this life. Which life would you rather? Would you like? And once people feel how good it is to be strong and to not be like in pain, tired, hangry. Once they have that feeling and they get to that place and the penny drops, which can take a while, and for some people it won't. Like, it's really hard to overcome years of maybe dieting or negative belief systems for women if they always saw their mothers eating, not enough food. That's also really challenging. It's like a subconscious program then, and a negative limiting belief. But if they're able to overcome all of that and they feel good, most of the time they'll go, actually, there's no way that I want to go back to that. And we can still get them to their goal. So with, what I was saying with that reverse dieting process, you can have your cake and eat it too. You can eat food, get strong, and also get lean. But maybe it's not going to be like unhealthy levels of leanness, like 15% body fat. And that becomes more of a thing as women get into their 30s, and fertility and wanting to have a baby starts to, maybe it's something that women want to think about. You really do need a degree of body fat percentage to have healthy menstruation and ovulation. I'm not saying that every woman that is like super lean won't menstruate and won't ovulate, but there is good evidence to suggest that you need to have a degree of body fat as a woman to exist in the spectrum of health, as opposed to the aesthetic spectrum, as opposed to the athletic spectrum. And that really is important when you're having those initial conversations and going, okay, well, what do you want to get out of this? And sometimes their goals or their priorities will conflict, and then a good coach will highlight that and go, okay, well, I've noticed that you said this, but you're actually doing this. What do you think that's about? And get them to ask the questions for themselves.
I liked how you put it before, that for women, the menstrual cycle can be like a monthly report card where it's like kind of like biofeedback on how things are going. Obviously it's not a report card I'm particularly familiar with, but I know as a dude, it's like, it can be hard to get a handle on where you're at with those things, on how your recovery is and whatnot. You tend to only realize, like what I was saying before about looking back and realizing, I was under eating drastically over that period years ago. You only realize once you're out of that, don't you? It's almost like you need to reach that place where you're like, wow, I feel adequately fueled and well rested now. I realize I wasn't feeling this way for so long.
That's so true. Hindsight's great, isn't it? Hindsight teaches a number of things. And when you feel good and you look back on, maybe photos of yourself. And certainly for me, I've got, I did this Medium blog post on how I unfucked my life, just talking about fueling the practice and wanting to do all of these different things. But, I was like, this is unusual for me to feel tired. This is not me. What's going on, and asking that question and trying to find answers and not being satisfied with some of the answers that I was getting from perhaps not the right place. I think for men, it's really challenging because, often signs like being irritable or snappy at your partner or snappy at your workplace, with your colleagues, not being able to hit your numbers, seeing a decline in strength, those can all be early cues. And then I'm a big fan as well of monitoring your resting heart rate or looking at your heart rate variability. So when we're looking at overtraining syndromes, which I think is probably a bit underreported, retrospectively, I can see a number of people I've known over the years that fell into or still fall into an overtraining syndrome, like constant injuries, constant pain. A lot of those situations, you're not aware of it because you're in it. So someone outside can see it if they're looking for the right thing and they know what to look for. But when you're in it, you don't see that. So having a metric or a measurable, like a wearable, I think Whoop is one that's becoming quite popular. I use a Garmin, and, the heart rate here when you're exercising is not accurate. I use a chest strap when I exercise to get my accurate readings. But for sleeping, it's fine. It does the job. And when you see a significant increase in your resting heart rate, it's probably a good sign that you're under recovered and you need to pull back. So for a guy and for a woman, looking at your heart rate variability or resting heart rate as well, and tracking that and looking at, like, if you've got a Garmin, you've got an app, and Whoop has an app as well. It'll give you a clue. And if your like resting heart rate's normally 50, so mine normally sits around 50. If your resting heart rate's like 50 or 48, and then you see it the next morning, it jumps up to 60. Fuck, that's a big jump. Like if it's around like between 50 56, it's fine. If it's at 60, you're not recovered. And then you've got no business smashing yourself up. But do a deload session, or do a light session, or do an active recovery session, or sleep the fuck in if you can. And with kids, like with babies, you'll notice when they're tired, they cry. When they're hungry, they cry. When they're like, there's always something, and it's basic shit. Are they hungry? Are they tired? Do they need to go to the toilet? Well, as adults, we should be taking care of the toiletry. The toilet training should be on point. But for, sleep and hunger are like two basic things, two really easily corrected things. And good measurable data exists and is coming out around this, as I said, overtraining syndrome, and what does that look like in our programming, how we're going to structure that, how to recognize the signs of overtraining. By the time you get to injury, or you get like the flu, or you get, really run down, it's very obvious. Like I haven't been, touch wood, I haven't been sick in a good 3 or 4 years. I haven't gone down. I haven't had to there's been times that I have had a day of fatigue, and I'm like, what's that about? And it was probably like me not correcting my nutrition appropriately, and not like taking a deload when I should have taken a deload. So now with women, I recommend the week before your period, you always just take a deload. Oh, but I feel good. Nah, take a deload. You take it before you need it, and then you don't need it, because it's easier to do that than to push through. Your numbers decline and drop, and then you feel shit because you're not hitting those lifts, or you're not getting the same reps and sets, or you feel tired. Just come back to fight another day. And you'll notice that if you do the deload session, do a little bit less volume, you're actually fine.
What would be your, I think there's probably another larger discussion for us to have at some point about this, your specific sort of recommendations for women and stuff around training. But what would be a couple of the big ones that I've picked up there is to eat more food. What else would you kind of sum that up with that are your main recommendations for women who are training and investing time and energy and going to the gym and trying to get results?
Yeah. So for women, having that strong foundation of getting enough food in. And if you're unsure, as I said, you track it on MyFitnessPal, or I think Chronometer is another app. I'm not familiar with that one, but I use MyFitnessPal. And then I go to the website to look at what I should be at. Often women will be like, that's too much. Like, yeah, if you're under eating, it probably will be too much. But as I said, Laurie CK has a great ebook that can actually tell you about the reverse dieting process, lifting heavy, not being afraid to lift heavy, and to actually, feel that burn, and to progressively overload. So that's another thing. I see women wanting to stay at a safe level, either on the barbell or with the weights, taking them a little bit to the extreme. As you mentioned before, sometimes you actually need to injure yourself to realize you go to that shit place to feel the difference. But you can take people to the extremes so that they can feel like this is what it is. This is what a maximal effort feels like. Yeah. This is what it feels to maybe fail on a rep. And then, you can actually see a lot of the time they've got a lot more that they're capable of. They're just bound by limiting belief. I think looking for good role models and having healthy role models, of being really judicious with your social media accounts that you follow. Because if you're just following social media accounts that are Victoria's Secret models, and they eat celery for breakfast, and, gusts of wind comes over and they blow over, look, they're stunning girls, but I wouldn't trust them to, carry something heavy if the zombie apocalypse came. So choosing their role models, so eating, lifting heavy and progressively overloading, choosing role models, being judicious with social media and using that, and always taking that deload before your period. The reason why is after you ovulate around day 14 of your cycle, that's a high hormone phase. So you have the higher amounts of estrogen, luteinizing hormone, and then progesterone starts to rise. So by the time you get to the week before your period, your hormones are quite high. You've got a number of estrogen receptors in your connective tissues. And one of the things that happens is your core body temperature rises. So you might notice you do a workout, particularly in summer. If your core body temperature is already up, you're gonna try and, like, you know, do your workout, but then you're kind of internally really quite hot. And the temperature is important because that affects the oxygen offloading into the bloodstream. And also that temperature will affect, your metabolic requirements for oxygen utilization. So that's why I recommend a deload before the onset of the period. Now, for women that don't get their period, because some don't, you need to probably figure out why. Majority of women, that being said, are on some sort of hormonal contraceptive. So there is a bit of a caveat to that. In our circles, I tend to find women aren't. And there's no judgment around choice, because it's such a tricky place to navigate around. But if you are on a oral contraceptive, like the pill, the conventional combined pill, that has quite a lot of estrogen in it, and there's some risk factors in terms of, like, clotting. So just make sure that you're not, you know, you're not like suffering from migraines or don't have a history of clots, but that will affect your viscosity of your blood. And also, as I said, I've had reports from women anecdotally that once they've gone off the pill, a lot of their joint pains went away. So you're right. There is a whole list. There's a whole conversation we could have about that, and it's under researched, so there's not a lot of research, but a great book to read for women that are potentially reading. Or if you've got a partner or a girlfriend, you got to get, you know, it's kind of behooves you to be aware of this, you know, because if they're kind of breathing down your neck like the dragon from Shrek, like,
you got a bit of science on your side.
That's it. And you got a bit of it's like personal gain from recommending these things, because the happier she is, happier you are. But Stacey Sims and her book Raw touch on this a bit, and they go through, like,
so funny. Misa just brought that book downstairs.
Great.
Going through a bookshelf, and she was like, "Oh, have you read this book?" And she chucked on. I was like, "No, I haven't heard of Stacey Sims." She was like, "Oh, it's awesome." And I flicked through a couple of pages, and I was like, "Wow, this looks important. I should know a lot of this stuff."
Yeah, it's so important, and it's great that she has that book, because women that have had children, okay, that's another thing that we've got to talk about. Like, that's another, if you're training women and they've had children, like, their pelvis and their ligaments have had supercharged amounts of this estrogen stuff, and training in pregnancy is really good. But there's, like, some, you know, ligamentous laxity, like they get a bit looser because the whole body's preparing for, you know, passing a watermelon through the birth canal. So there's a lot of considerations for women in training. I think the important thing is that they train in the right way. You know, it's like strength is the trump card for women for sure. Like, getting as strong as you can, in a safe way that's also, like, mindful and cognizant of, we are women, and, you know, you don't have to kill yourself like a guy, and it's important to tune into the body and rest when it's appropriate, when you need to, but don't be afraid of really pushing yourself in your sessions and getting strong and working towards those ring routines. Like, we know enough women that can do it, and there's a safe way to do it that's underpinned by the nutritional component.
I like it, Marg. I think that's a pretty, that's a juicy little teaser for us to leave it on. Bit of a cliffhanger for folks. Mate, I appreciate it. I think that's a very cool chat for anyone, you know, male or female, doing the movement thing or come through the training realm. But particularly that last part is some really relevant stuff for women and you know, those that are in the gym doing the thing. Yeah, I'd love to pick it back up at a point soon and sort of get you to go deep on all that if you come back on.
Oh, that'd be awesome. And you know, like, I think, like, you guys are doing such great stuff, like, especially with jiu-jitsu. Like, that's another topic, like, getting women to be comfortable around getting a strangle on, giving a strangle, and actually diving into essentially what's a male-dominated sport. But one of our girls from Oz that we sent over to you years ago, she's, like, crushing it, you know. And every time, like, I see her up on the JV Instagram, I'm just like, she's a beast. Like, she's a real testament to to like, you know, what you guys have been doing over there and the community as well. So, yeah.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, yeah, we could have talked all about Liz. She's been an amazing person to have here at the gym, and yeah, she's a real fixture of the jiu-jitsu program, and it's fucking cool seeing her progress with it. Man, she's a real handful.
She is.
I got like 40 kilos and like, I don't know, 12 years of experience on it, but you know, she's a tricky one to deal with. I think anyone that comes from that level of like movement training where they've got the strength and the mobility through all those different ranges.
Yeah.
As soon as they find their way onto the mats, they're just instantly hard to deal with.
Yeah. Too true.
Mate, where can people get in touch with you? Where can they see your stuff? You got anything you want to plug?
I took my website offline just because while I'm studying med, it's I just wasn't having the time to get to like emails and stuff. But probably Instagram, like Margaret Durnan. I'm on Instagram, and just like send me a message if you have any other questions. I try to put out some semi-informative kind of stuff, but also time's precious. I think I'm drafting one up today on the science behind breath work and what actually happens with our CO2 and O2 when we're doing our breath holds and our breathing, and, you know, just basic stuff that people were like, why do I have to do that, you know, breathing shit? So that's what I'm going to try and get out in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, nothing necessarily I want to plug. Yeah.
At Margaret Durnan, Durnan. Durnan. Dude, awesome. It's great to catch up with you. I appreciate you making the time to come onto the show. And I really hope we can catch up in person at some point soon. You can come meet my little boy.
Oh, I can't wait. It's been amazing. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, pleasure. Guys, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, please help to support the show. Just take a screenshot of it, post to your Instagram, share it with someone who you might know that would benefit from it. Just helps to get the show out there. Big love to Marg, and thank you for listening. We'll see you guys next week.